So let's start. Good evening. I'm Councilwoman Pine Acton, Council Representative for the 4th District, and also the Chairman of the Ways and Means Committee. We're calling the committee meeting to order at 7:01 p.m. Joining us tonight, we have the following council members: Councilman Ron Brewer, Councilman at Large, Councilman Gloria Slade, Councilman at Large, Councilman of the 1st District, William Godwin, Councilwoman of the 5th District, Councilwoman Linda Barnes Caldwell, Council member for the 6th District, Councilman Dwight Williams, and Ways and Means Committee member, Council Representative of the 2nd District, Councilman Cozy Weatherspoon. I think, and of course, we have our legal counsel online with us today, which is Attorney Winfred Williams. I'm going to start the meeting and I would like to acknowledge Mayor Prince. Good evening, Mayor Prince. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. So before us this evening, we have two ordinances for the Ways and Means Committee. The first one is a continuation from our previous meeting, which had a discussion point of CPO 2020-69, which is an ordinance approving the amendment for garbage collection fees for users located in the city of Gary. Also on the agenda tonight, we have before us CPO 2020-77, which is an ordinance of the city of Gary, Indiana, amending the city fee schedule ordinance number 8968 by increasing and establishing fees for the city of Gary departments. I believe both of these ordinances are sponsored by our mayor, Mayor Jerome Prince, and were prepared by City Attorney Rodney Poe for CPO 2020-77. And I also think, Poe, you might have did 69 as well. So we're going to start with 2020-69. Just as a review, I'm not going to, if needed, I'll do a brief overview. So this is the third committee meeting that we've been discussing this topic. There's a proposed rate increase. Based on the information that was provided to the council, the rate increase proposed is taking it from $16.30 to be exact, to $28.25. Just as a reminder, I wanted to provide you guys, again, with this comparison chart to give you some brief. Let me present this real quick. So this is a refresher point. We've reviewed all of these different options over the last couple of meetings. And at this point, we wanted to get some feedback. Hold on. Okay, so hold on. I think I have to share my screen first. I'm not going to keep this up the whole meeting, but I did want you guys just to have this information in front of you quickly. All right, so if you can see this, this is just, again, a summary of what we reviewed over the last couple of meetings. We went back to the stakeholders to ask them for different options to consider. And this is a consensus of what has been presented to us over the previous meetings. In this column is the first that was originally proposed. These are the options. I think one of the requests that the council had, and again, this is just a breakdown, which fees incorporated 3% shortfall, which incorporated the 12% loss on collection rate, which had the included the 650 additional service fees that we spoke about, just a continuation of what the number of customers is currently being billed, and then also the projected rate increase that we've already discussed, which is 3% escalator year over year. Any questions about that? I think it's good that since we do have Mayor Prince on, I would like to start there. Mayor Prince, thank you so much for joining us. I know we have discussed, and Attorney McCain did a great job in our last committee meeting, kind of giving us the overview in terms of what the administration's point of view was. But since you are the sponsor, we did want to take a moment to kind of give you an opportunity to kind of give us your point of view.
Sure. Thank you. Thanks for having another meeting on this. I think it's relevant. Um, my comments will be brief in as much as I'm not sure how much more I can add after the information that's been shared. The administration certainly, like the council, wanted to make this as least impactful as we possibly could on the residents, and to that extent, presented at least a few options. At the end of the day, a couple things are certain. One is that anytime an ordinance is presented to the council by the administration as a sponsor, the representatives who are present speak for the administration. And so to that extent, our position hasn't changed. And the sole position is, and it's never attractive to increase a fee, pass a tax or anything. But in this situation, this is something that should have been addressed prior to this administration. And we're just doing the responsible thing by making sure that, the district is able to continue to operate, or not necessarily the district, but the district certainly being responsible for submitting the fees to the waste collector. Certainly, they're an integral part of this. But in addition to that, it's also an opportunity to pay for the services out of the proper fund. I'm fairly certain that all of those things have been articulated prior to this. So outside of that, I'm not certain how much more that I could really add, other than the fact that this is necessary. It's something that's been necessary for a while. And to that extent, we're just attempting to right the ship, if you will, however painful it may be.
Sure, thank you. Does any council members have any questions for Mayor Prince at this time?
Councilwoman Atkins.
Yes, Councilman Brewer.
So I had asked a question about the fees that on the city side, where we're picking up from various departments, parts and things of that nature, where the city can share their part in paying into the fee. That way, that would help cushion the burden of this a little bit. Mayor, what is your thoughts on that?
Sure, I understand your question, Councilman. Can you maybe present it again?
So I believe it's about $650,000 that the city does on their side. How can the city take on that responsibility and paying that, where we can take that off the table and we can deal with the fee part for the residents? Because right now the residents is holding that whole burden of everything, all the pickup for the city, special projects that we do. Also at the beach, people pay to go to the beach, and I think there's a revenue generated out there. Also in other parts, the youth pavilion, we charge for fees there. So how can we help cushion this burden here with the number, if the city would pay their portion there of the 600, I believe like 650 or 680 of the city part?
Yeah, thank you, Councilman, for the clarity. And so to that, I would say that nothing's changed, other than prior years. And I'll point back to the fact that this fee increase hadn't been addressed prior to this. And the reason it is largely is the city certainly isn't in a position to incur any additional expenses. Outside of that, I'm not certain as to why it was never presented to this body before. But the short answer to your question is the city is not able to incur that sort of expense for this.
So, may I ask a question?
Sure.
Yes, sir.
All right. First, I want to thank the mayor for being here. And while we certainly know that my good friend, Attorney McCain, is more than able, I just thought that given the magnitude of this issue, especially when we're talking about essentially a tax, right? A fee, a tax on the residents, that it's important for citizens to hear not just from us and employees of the city, but directly from all elected officials, stakeholders, in terms of what their position is. I think to Councilman Brewer's question, we have three options, at least three options that have been presented to us. And so I'd like to hear which option is your preference. What are you asking us to do, right? as the sponsor of it. We have these other options which are not currently the legislation, but will require an amendment. So what is your preference? How would you like the council to respond to the crisis with trash collection fees?
So, Councilman, you raised a couple good points. So the first one, as I stated prior to this, anytime a representative of the administration is present and the administration is the sponsor of an ordinance, you can absolutely be certain that the administration has been versed on it, had all the intricate details have been shared. And to that point, the administration has given a direction for it to be presented to the council. Having said that, that is the administration's position. Second point, in terms of which option do I prefer, statutorily, that's the responsibility of the council. It's your responsibility to pass this fee and, or at least to have it introduced and to consider it and vote it up or down, either way. In the event that this council chooses not to, there certainly are remedies to address that, but we haven't gotten to that point yet. The second remedy, as you know, would be, or maybe not, would be for a special administrator to enact the fee through an executive order. And to that extent, you know, as of now, I certainly haven't been appointed a special administrator. We had engaged in discussion with the DOJ very early in the year, and it was their position at that particular time, not necessarily to not appoint me. In fact, we received very favorable response based on the inquiries that were led by them and the answers to the questions that we submitted, including background and experience and things of that nature. However, it was their position that we didn't need a special administrator. The special administrator, from my perspective, is largely or solely responsible for one thing. And oftentimes, I think that gets confused with who oversees the operations of the district. Clearly, that's the CEO of the city, which is the mayor, and it gets back to the ordinance being presented by you. It certainly was through our direction that it be presented because it needs to be done. Outside of that, if this body chooses not to act or not to pass it, it is the intention of the administration to repetition the DOJ, excuse me, to consider or make a decision at that particular time as to whether, you know, we need a special administrator. And obviously, at that point, I think the answer would be emphatically yes.
So let me just ask a follow-up question, because
Sure.
You're the sponsor of the ordinance, right? So the ordinance that's before us, I believe, is option 1. Is that
So
correct?
actually, just to clarify, it's actually 4 different ones, right? So it's what was presented originally, which is the 73% increase, which is what the administration proposed to the council. And then the council went back to the stakeholders to say, hey, okay, give us a justification of why the increase is needed. And then after obtaining those informations, we asked for different options. And so then they provided 3 additional options. So you really have a total of 4.
So to that point, I want to be clear about which one you are asking us to pass. Is it the one that was originally submitted or one of the other 3 options?
I'm asking the council to make a decision on whatever you feel is best, Councilman. We've presented options as requested. And again, I'm asking you to do what's statutorily required of you, and that's to consider what's been presented to you and vote it up or down.
Yes, and so I have said before, I'm in favor of the lowest cost option. Only problem with the lowest cost option is that means the city, to Councilman Brewer's earlier point, would be on the hook for, I guess, roughly $650,000 or so of what it costs to pick up from the parks and City Hall and other city buildings. And so if that's in fact the case, it's important to know that either through deferring our debt obligation to the sanitary district, which has been talked about, or some other cuts or revenue stream, that if option 1 is voted on, in order to meet our obligations to Republic, will the city be able to meet its obligations to Republic, right? Because the city will have a bill that it does not currently have if the lowest cost option is the one that's chosen. So that's the only reason why, you know, I wanted to, you know, depending on which one we choose, there's certain implications on the city side. So that's all I wanted to say.
Sure. Yeah, Councilman, I wasn't offended by the question at all. But again, I think the statute is very clear in terms of who has responsibility at this particular point. You know, I will say this, like in many other instances where we didn't agree, you know, this administration will do what's responsible and what's reasonable and will, you know, continue to find other ways. But you're right. We constantly look for additional options in order to lessen the impact on the residents because like yourself and all the council members, I mean, we're consumers as well. Even though the impact, you know, in most instances won't be as egregious as it will to our least able resident in any event, it certainly should and is a consideration, should be rather, and is a consideration.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
So I have a question, Mayor. If, for instance, if the conversation continues within this committee and the council does continue to analyze the additional options, and there is a consensus that, you know, we might consider one of the options that was not the $28.25, which I think was the 73% increase. Since the administration is the sponsor of the legislation, how would you make that adjustment? If the council, because I think your statement was the council will have to, you know, make a decision in terms of what they think is fair, what they want to approve. So what if the decision is okay from the additional options that was provided to us by Mr. Cinder and Mr. Bakari, it's a different option that we, you know, would like to at least consider for vote. Would you make that change on your legislation?
So you raised a few points there, you know, based on whatever this council does, again, the administration would go back to the drawing board or to, you know, reassess whatever position we're in then. I don't think anyone's on the call tonight prepared to answer that specifically without any specific action being taken this evening. And so, you know, rest assured that we will do the responsible thing just as we've done by presenting this ordinance.
Okay.
Well,
I guess I'm a little confused because the other options that I'm mentioning is what was proposed by you know, Gary Sanitary District for consideration, as well as, you know, in conjunction with Cinder and Company for consideration.
Sure. So where's the confusion?
You just stated that if we were to select one of these other options, that you all will still go back to the drawing board to make a different decision in terms of how to move forward. So I just want to understand.
That's not what I stated, and I'll be expressly clear. What I stated is that in the event this council chooses an option, and I didn't state it, but this what was inferred by the statement. In the event that this council makes an option that leaves a deficit, the administration will go back, reassess how much the deficit is, and address it appropriately. And that's the part that we aren't prepared to tell you specifically how, because we don't have an indication as to what will occur tonight.
Okay. So thank you. Thank you. Mr. Cinder, are you on the call? Mr. Bakari, are you on the call?
Yes, I'm here. Carl.
Hey,
I am.
Cinder.
Yep. Thank you, Carl.
Hey, I just want to clarify, within the three options that you proposed, that you completed for the analysis and proposed to the council, either one of those three options, will they leave the the sanitary district at a deficit?
Carl, go ahead, Carl. I think you're best prepared to answer that.
The option that would be at a lesser amount that would not cover the transfer station and city services of $650,000. That's not going to be covered if you go with that option.
So I think that was option 1 and 2, right? Option 1 and 2 did not include.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. So the sanitary district or the city would be short that amount of money, and they would have to figure out how to fund that.
Okay. So council members, are you all clear on what option that leaves?
Well, basically, I believe the option is still there. We're just stating that we're only going to fund certain things, just the trash pickup for the residents and not
And
all the
other
other
services.
city services. Yes.
Okay, I understand. Does any other council member have any questions or comments? Does any member of the public have any questions or comments? We're good?
Well, just in case anyone come. So I want to be clear, we're not scheduled to go out to bid until when?
Because Mr. Vicari, you want to answer that?
Sure. Yes, Councilmember, we would go to bid about 1 year from now. The contract expires if the GSD board elects for the last year of options to the contract, because it was a 5-year agreement with 2 one-year options. We are in our first 1-year option. That would happen this coming May, which would leave 1 more year. So it'd be May of 2022. So back that up. My recommendation to the GSD board, if the GSD board is still going to be the responsible party, would be to go to bid about 1 year from now in order to make sure that we have a good, clean, competitive bid process with recommendations to the board by plenty of time before the contract expires in May of 2022.
Okay.
Madam Chairman,
Yes, Councilman Lay.
I would suspect we would go beyond Republic. As I understand, there was difficulty between the former special administrator and Waste Management. If that statement is inaccurate, I certainly apologize because it's hearsay. What I would suggest is of the executive branch, specifically the mayor, to have a conversation with Waste Management. Let's now make it a competitive bid. No longer do it with one person. I thought the contract on this year ran out May the 21st. I'm sorry, May 2021, as I understand it, that we're operating under this option. So that gives us at least 6 months to try and see if we can't get 2 bidders and not be held hostage by 1 bidder. That would be, of course, my recommendation. So that would be something I would ask the executive branch to do, to look in where we would have more than Republic. And we have 6 months, so beyond that, let's assume everything stays the same, we would have an opportunity to do that.
Thank you,
Yeah, when
Councilman Lay. So I think, Mr. Riccardi, do you want to respond to that? That is.
Sure. So just to go back in 2012, it was an open public bid. It's publicly advertised. In all the legal advertisements are made. We reach out to all the parties that we know about in the Chicago area and nationally. And we received 2 bids, one from Waste Management, one from Republic. That was in 2012. In 2013, when it had been rebid, we received 2 bids, one from Lakeshore Recycling System and one from Republic. Waste Management chose not to bid. And again, that was a open public competitive bid process. It was Waste Management that chose not to bid. So if we go back out to bid again, it has to, by law, be an open, publicly bidded contract. So if Waste Management chooses to bid, that's up to them. We can't make them bid.
Madam Chairman, apparently I'm usually misunderstood. What I'm suggesting is, I have been informed, again, I don't know the accuracy of the statement. I'm not asking for a private bid. I certainly don't want to discuss 2012. What I'm talking about is we're on an option year, as I understand it, and we seem to go all over the place. The option would, as I understand it, the contract option we're under would end May the 21st. Let's do a public bid. What I understand, there was some confusion between the previous special administrator and Waste Management. And as I indicated, I will apologize if that statement is untrue. But again, I'm just simply asking, Mr. Gunn, maybe not you to do it, that the board itself go and when public bids say, okay, now we basically do not have the same special administrator. Would you consider submitting a bid? It would be a closed bid. I'm not suggesting giving them any type of advantage. I simply thought, even though the mayor is not the special administrator, he is the senior executive, to at least talk to them about submitting a bid, but it would be a closed bid. We wouldn't give them any advantage. Now, I do have another question. In terms of what we're doing here, and then I'm going to be quiet and let you guys do whatever you want to do, and I simply will cast a vote when you come to the end. I do not believe that we should make the sanitary district whole for the failure of the special administrator, the director, and the board to put that 3% acceleration on there. It makes no sense to me. When you do something, make a unilateral decision independent of the other party, then that's your decision. So again, no matter what we compute, I'd like to know what's happening with that escalation clause. I think they're asking us to make them whole. That may not be, at least it's clear to me, but it may not be clear to the council. Their fees and expenses have not went up if we leave certain years out. I think since that's been paid, they certainly should pay that. It's already paid. We shouldn't try to make them whole. That may be where I differ with the sanitary district as well as the majority of this council. They made a unilateral decision. The people of this community was not aware. I do not believe the previous council was aware. If it was aware, it didn't say anything. I'm talking about 18, 19, and certainly going into 20, we were here. So those are my only two concerns. Once you set the fee, then anything I have suggested will be worked upon. We will do the best we can, but set the fee, and then we know, and I think that's been my position. I'm surprised the mayor did agree with that. Set a fee, and then we know where we are. You make that determination, and then I will look at some of the things. But I think we should be very concerned about this escalation 3%. That it's not being considered as part of what we're doing.
Thank you, Councilman Lay. I just want to, I guess, just bring it up. The options that was proposed to us, from our last committee meeting did not include any form of, I guess, reconciliation for the previous 3% miss from 2018, 19, and 20.
Well, what's triggering it going from 16 to 12, 16 to 28, if that's not in there?
Well, no, that's the original. Now, the original that was attached to the legislation, it did. That 28, 25, it did include that. But the
yes,
three options.
Right. I'm saying forget option 3. Let's knock out those 3 years, 18, 19, and 20, where that escalation and what now they do everything, but that's not in there. They have to eat that.
Yeah, so the other option.
One way or another, they have to eat it. The court would make them eat it too.
Yes, sir. So the other options that we have does not include that. Does not include the 3%.
But as I understand this, and again, apologize, I will speak very little to the council starting, I guess, today. What I'm asking, in those other ones, are you changing the services? That's the question. So you can make it $1 if you change the services. In the second option, are you changing the services to the city of Gary?
So the third option that
second option for a moment. Just what happens on the second option?
Yeah. So in the second option, the services that are provided to the city are not included. What is included is the I guess you can say the 12%. A makeup for the 12% miss in terms of collection rate. So they have an 88% collection rate, and so they assess like a 12%.
No, I understand that. I understand that. I'm only interested in this escalation clause. In the third option, is it in there, this escalation clause?
No, sir, it is not. And the services are included.
Oh, it's not in there? Okay. So we're not paying that back at all, is that correct?
And the proposed options, right? No.
Right. Okay. That was my concern. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Councilman Godwin.
thank you. I have a couple questions for Mr. Bakari and maybe some for others. I guess the first one is, again, hypothetically, if this council does not take action on the 15th, that would mean that it would be some point after January 1, most likely before action was taken. You suggested before that the fee would continue to be higher. Is that still the case? So if the council delays action to February or whenever, what are the implications of that? I just want to make sure I'm clear.
Yeah, thank you. So currently, every month we wait before a rate increase per the current contractual rate we're being charged. We're still losing $133,000 per month. When we get into January 1st of 2021, it'll be 3% more because the contract with Republic has a 3% escalator per year. So, pardon me, I'm not doing the math, but it's $133,000 a month plus 3% would be the loss.
So our options 2, 3, and 4, I guess we could put it that way, are including this increase anyway. Right? It's already.
Yeah, the escalator's there, and I think it was a matter of semantics. I believe I understand what Councilman Lay is stating is he does not want to pass a rate that would include any past years, right? So it'd be 2018, 2019, and 2020. Those 3% escalators, of which we have not had the luxury to charge the residents, right? And we're having to still pay Republic. But going forward, and those were all those options. And I think Councilwoman Atkins made that clear that the options to the proposed ordinance that was presented to the council, none of them include catching up, if you will, for past year's losses due to that escalator that happens year over year.
Thank you. And just secondly, if we take any action, right? So if we raise it to the point that at the very least we are covering the cost of the services that the sanitary district bears, is that considered sufficient, right? So I'm in favor of the lowest cost option, which would currently mean that the civil city would have to pay for its own trash collection and find a way to do that. So would that be deemed sufficient by, say, for example, Mr. Teed or Bruno Piggott, the commissioner, who's overseeing our consent decree?
Yeah, they would just want to see.
The council did what it was supposed to do.
Yeah. They would just want to see us, I would believe, year over year, to collect the amount of money that we're spending, right? So if we're spending, for example, $5.6 million roughly this year with Republic, they're going to want to see us collect somewhere near $5.6 million. I would say not $5.6 million minus $650,000 that are subsidized to provide for the city services.
Right. So basically, as long as we pass something that covers the cost that the sanitary district is billed, not talking about historical interest rates, then we have done our duty, right, at the very minimum. Now, the only other question I have is, in the letter, the mayor referenced the letter that was sent to the mayor regarding the federal government's decision about whether or not they wanted a special administrator at this point. One of the things they note in the middle paragraph, after saying that the board already has, the GSD board has already certified that funding is available to comply with the consent decree obligations from 2020, it says GSD has an experienced director, congratulations, Mr. Bakari, and third-party professionals. And then it says the city of Gary has continued to comply with its loan repayment obligations. So that's one of the points that the federal government, Mr. Teed and Mr. Piggott, raised as a reason for congratulating the sanitary district and relieving it of the need or the cost, I suppose, of having a special administrator. So since they say we've been paying our debt obligations, and I know we're having conversations about delaying payment or deferring payment of debt obligations. Do you think any such action like that might make Mr. Teague or Mr. Pickett or whoever Mr. Biden may make their successors become, would that change their opinion of the quality and condition of the sanitary district?
Is that question for me, Councilman?
Whoever's brave enough to answer it.
I can answer that question.
I
federal-
will start with Mr. Bakari, and then we'll go to our.
No, I'm going to be, we're dealing with the court. Mr. Bakari is not a licensed attorney.
Right.
In other words, let me tell you what we're doing, then y'all stop playing with it, do what you want to do with it. We're getting an agreement from the federal government. That federal agreement will then go into a federal court. So no, I don't know what you're reading and the implications of what you're reading, but in terms of the suggestion, if we get all three, no, Mr. Biden and Vice President Harris and McConnell would have little or nothing to do with this. We're asking a federal judge under the consent decree to do something.
Right. So I'm referring to the letter they sent to the mayor in terms of their decision about special administrator.
But that may be true. I don't, at this point, what I'm suggesting is the special administrator has nothing to do with this. Let's assume they don't appoint a special administrator. Okay, you pass it. I would assume there would be no need for a special administrator, whatever you do. What I'm talking about doing, and apparently it's being confused, unless the council itself want to pursue it, and then I'll get out of the way. What I'm talking about is simply another way of lessening the impact. There's even a third thing I want to do, but we're having problems people understanding the first thing. There's a second thing I think the city could do, what I've discussed with the mayor, that we can go forward on. But the special administrator would have little or nothing to do with this. We would come back to the council. Ultimately, the ultimate decision would be back to the council itself as to an appropriation of those funds. So the council is going to have a full participation once, once the federal government, along with Judge Van Brocklin, tell us what to do. We will have to come back to the council for a new appropriation of any dollars that we postpone. They don't disappear. So I'm not sure if Mr. Bakari can answer that. Fine, I don't think he can.
Well, let me just clarify, if I may. I think what the mayor mentioned it, right? So if the council does not take action or takes action that's deemed insufficient, right, then he's saying that the federal government might have to reconsider their assessment of the need for a special administrator. So then I turn to the letter that the commissioner and regional administrator sent to the mayor regarding their decision not to have a special administrator. One of the things it points out is that we're meeting our debt obligations, right?
Yeah.
So
what's the date on that letter, Mr. Godwin?
It's actually undated.
What's the date?
It's undated, but I would presume it was certainly before April or May of this year.
Right. Okay. This is a whole new concept. This is something new. Again, we have known since the very beginning. Mr. Jewel Harris Jr. Told us this, that if the council failed to act at all, most likely the federal government would appoint a special administrator, which in fact could be the board itself. I mean, so I'm not hung up on whether it's the mayor. I mean, whoever they would give the board the authority to set it. In other words, to set what the thing is. I think that was what the mayor was saying. He too, of course, is not an attorney. If you do nothing, then they will probably go back to the federal government, the EPA or someone, and say, here's what we need to do to make, to do everything. That's dangerous for us to allow them to do that. So if we do it, then there won't be, in my opinion, a need for a special administrator if the council functions.
Right, and I guess my only concern was that they're saying, I guess my question for Mr. Bakari is that if we stop meeting certain debt obligations, is that a negative for the sanitary district as it relates to the federal government's assessment of the performance of the sanitary district under the consent decree. So if we stop paying for a certain, Mayor, I think.
Madam Chair, or I'm not sure who the chairperson is, and I apologize if it's.
The chair.
I thought so. Thank you. So, Councilman, the only thing I'd add to that is that if I'm not mistaken, and certainly we've got a couple of attorneys on the line, including yourself, the debt obligation that they were speaking of is that it's relative to the consent decree, and that was the repayment of the loan from the sanitary district. And to that point, the city, prior to this administration, continued to meet that and has done and will do so, under this one.
Right, but yes, my concern is that there's been discussions about not meeting that obligation in the future so that we would free up some capital in order to lessen the burden of the city by the city having to be responsible for its own trash collection, something that it's not currently responsible. That was my understanding and part of what Councilman Lay's efforts were to get a break on some of those payments so we could catch up and find new revenue sources to soften the burden on the residents.
No, I even have something beyond that. I'm trying to get to understanding of step one before I even get to two. The sanitary district will be made whole. Any new monies would be coming as a result, would come from the city. It would, let's assume, just for the sake of discussion, that the court would allow on this 4.3 million to move it, postpone. We did it on the school district for 25 million. I'm merely suggesting we move it back. Let's say we ask for 2 years, they give us 1 year. The amount we would have would be $600,000. We're in a pandemic. We have people unemployed. This city is 74% African Americans. It's a lot of rationale will be given to the court along to the federal government. That decision would be made in Washington, so that gets rid of Biden and all that. If they say no up there, then we will never get back here. I suspect they have more things on their plate to be concerned with. Let's say we do not, just for the sake of this discussion, we do not have to pay the $600,000 immediately to the sanitary district. It took us years to get to where we are now. At that point, the council would have $600,000 to appropriate. What I would be suggesting, and I see Attorney Trent is on, he and I are working together on this, he thought is the lead here. The $600,000, we then would pay some portion, if not all, to the sanitary district, who would give credit to customers. The customer would never get the money. The money would go to the sanitary district, and they would divide it by 22,000 or whatever the figure they got, or the people that have paid, and give them credit toward their bill. There is another step after that that I'm going to bring, certainly have discussed it with the mayor to do, how we can even may accelerate back the payment to the sanitary district, that it does not have to be concerned. It's a way that can be done through somebody giving us a very substantial gift, or we look at money again that we will get somewhere around 22 or 23. All I'm trying to do is lessen, and I believe Attorney Trent McCain, the mayor, we're trying to lessen the impact only in the year 2021. This is not a panacea for life. This is just simply this year, because of the referendum has been passed, which the majority of this council voted for, and is through. It'll come on in July, as I understand it. I would assume NIPSCO is going to come on soon. I would suspect January the 1st. Go ahead, Mr.
Lay. Well, Mr. Lay, if we do that, so what you're saying, if we just pay the whole fee that they're asking for, and they'll get a credit down the line then?
No, do what you want to do.
No, I'm trying to understand what you're saying. When you talk about a credit, I was trying to understand what you were saying about this.
No,
credit.
if the council decided, and I'm an accountant as well as a lawyer, I understand exactly, and it's sometimes difficult to maybe explain it all to lay people. What would happen if, and I think the federal government may be willing to take step one, we would immediately be able to appropriate that money to go to the sanitary district. Just a dollar would go over there. They would divide that dollar and reduce, it would be a credit back to the customer. Now, whatever you set it at, my plan is going to function anyway. It has nothing to do with the amount. It will be an attempt to function. I do not believe the sanitary district will be hurt at all by the postponement. Assuming the step two that I'm not going to even bring up now, where we would go and try to recapture even those dollars, and we would not have to necessarily have the postponement. It's a two-pronged attack on lessening the impact. That's all it is. And I'm only giving you one at this point because the other one would be even probably more confusing exactly how it will work out. So again, once you pay us it, whatever you pay us, we will continue to work. My only position has been from the very beginning, I do not want to lessen what's done to the residents. Now, if you're talking about taking away from the beach and stuff like that, I'm not overly concerned with that. But I am concerned with the residents or whatever you would want to take away. And I notice my president is laughing. It's not the beach. I don't go to the beach. I couldn't go to the beach here until 1971. But anyway, I know that's hard to believe, but that's the way it works. So, so all I'm suggesting is whatever you pay us, no matter what you pay us, we will deal with that. We will deal with that. Even if not only we might have to restore services. You see what I mean? In other words, when we go back, we might even say, well, now we have, the mayor has indicated he can't do it presently, which again, he's made me aware of that. He does not have the money presently to do it, or where the money would come from. This plan would allow us to even restore services if that became necessary, depending on what the council would do. We would then give them the money, they would give us more services. Whoever won the bid. That's why, again, I was suggesting we go after all of the bidders and get the best bidder we can have now. Let's start over where we get more than, one bidder, that's all.
Thank you, Councilman Lake. Is there any other comments or questions?
So Councilwoman Atkins, I want to make sure I'm clear. So which option is it that will make the sanitary whole without the city services piece? Which option is that?
Three?
Is that 3? Could you
No.
without
I'm hesitating on the make whole part. Like,
well, let me rephrase it then. Make them current to this point, not the back, the rearage, just current for 2021 going forward. Not the rearage that we owe them.
mm-hmm.
You're
And not include this, and not including city services.
Right.
That would be option 2.
That'd be option 2. Okay.
Is
Mr. Sender still on? Mr. Sender, if that's incorrect, please step in. I just want to make sure I'm articulating correctly.
Yeah, option 2 is just for the curbside collection. It wouldn't include any of the city services. So it wouldn't include general services, cleanups. It would not include beach garbage collection,
Mm-hmm.
nor the free citizen drop service that's provided in all the city-owned facilities, City Hall, Hudson Campbell,
Public safety.
etc. Correct.
I want to make sure that I'm clear with this. So will we need to make amendment to this to say any of those services that will be incurred will have to be paid for by the administration? Because
Or it would definitely be an amendment needed to the fee schedule, which is what I asked, right? So if we were to consider one of the other options, we're not the sponsor of the legislation. Would that legislation be updated if we were willing to consider one of the other options? And then also, in addition to that, you might also have to, I don't know, I guess Attorney Williams might have to give us that one about adding on respective term to speak to what it covers and what it does not cover. I don't know.
So it would seem to me, if I may, that we would have to obviously amend the ordinance, which we have the power to do. There would probably have to be something on the floor at this point. Because we don't know which one, we may vote on several options, right? Depending on which one has enough votes to become law. I guess my concern, and I totally understand what Councilman Lay is doing and the idea behind it. My concern has been is that we don't want to pass a fee that's too high, and we're relying on the success of what Councilman Lay is doing, right? Because let's just say, as he told us, choose a fee, whether that's $20, $25, whatever. But I don't want us to choose a $28 fee or a $26 fee, relying on the success of what the federal court may or may not do, right? Because once we set a fee, then that's pretty much set. It's hard to go back and try to course correct and reduce the fee. So I'm in favor of whatever option, and maybe we can even find an option 5, right? The third way, if you will, that will be higher than the lowest cost option, which provides no dollars for cleanups and other options and services that are offered, but maybe it mitigates some of that, right? So maybe it doesn't cover the whole 650,000, but maybe it covers 200,000, right? So there's some things that we can do that will be built into the fee without making that fee overly 73% increase, right? Because we know that even with whatever fee we decide, you're still going to have a 3% escalator projecting into the future. So even that's going to continue to increase. So if we go with a $28 fee, that will very soon become a $30+ fee, right? So I think what my option is to find the lowest option and then do an add-on of that. And I'll rely on Mr. Stender and the other financial experts that will help soften that $600,050 some odd dollars. Maybe it's $200,000 or $250,000, so that we're not just totally putting the city on the hook for such a large sum, while we hopefully are able to get the debt obligation deferred. Now, the only reason I mentioned the debt obligation deferral as it relates to how the GSD is being assessed by relevant EPA officials is that I would not want even a federal court's decision allow us to defer it to then be seen by a regulator, right, as us not meeting an obligation per the consent decree that we should be meeting, or us not providing dollars. I guess we'd have a deferral. We'd have a reasonable reason to not be paying it because the court has allowed us to do it. But I wouldn't want them to judge poorly the financial condition or performance of the sanitary district if we are all of a sudden not meeting that obligation, even with the imprimatur, if you will.
Madam Chairman.
I brought it up.
Madam
I just wanted
Chairperson.
to make this quick statement, and then I'll let you speak, Councilman Lay. So I understand what you're saying, Councilman Godwin, but I also think like for that analysis to be done, right, we will have to get a commitment up front from the administration in terms of what is feasible on their end for Sender to even have, a point of reference to work towards. Again, just based off of like what you just said, the starting point will be option 2 from that, right? And so, I'm thinking about time. I'm thinking about, this potential proposal is to set this fee increase to start at a January 1 start date. So I just wanted to also put that in the heads of council members as well. Councilman Lay?
Oddly enough, I agree with what my president, Mr. Godwin, said, except the last part. He got a little gobbledygook there to me. Basically, no, don't set a fee based upon that we're going to get this done. I absolutely agree with that portion of it. Again, even as you reduce the services, so far, some of the options don't reduce services to the people. It reduces, and he laughed when I said the beach and the picking up and stuff like that. If you do that, I can probably live with that one. That still gives us time to proceed with what we want to do. The contract with Republic would be that if we were able to restore the difference, whether they would be, or whoever gets the contract, I should say, over at the sanitary district, if we were able to do this, then they restore those services. That would be fine. I can agree with that one. That's why I say I don't think I'm that far away from what Mr. Godwin has said, except that last part. I'm not sure I fully buy into that. But again, whatever fee you said, it appears either we create this fifth option, as he said, or it could be option 2 there now, and where we get rid of certain, reduce certain city services. Maybe the best way we can do, but we also need to see what the city itself would do in the meantime. I like the way he did it. You would maybe reduce it 150,000, something like that, rather than put that full obligation onto the city, and then see if we can't work that out.
Do we want to pinpoint a dollar value, or do we want to look at what's included into that 650? I'm just throwing it out there and say okay, we would propose potentially the fee increase to include the citizen drop off and then the community cleanup dumpsters.
Right. I think that would be something that Mr. Bakari, along with the city administration, Mr. Trent, the mayor, I think they should resolve that. I don't think we have to be and get back to us soon enough that we can set up the various options that Mr. Godwin's talking about, Councilman Godwin is talking about. Assuming so let them do that. Let the 3 of them or those 2 parties, the sanitary district and the mayor, get together on these services that are purely city in nature.
Okay. Attorney McCain, can you take that action for, I guess, the committee, if you will, to look at the $650 annual spend that equates for the city services, and then to see, based on what you guys can do in terms of supporting a portion or all of that in an effort for us to kind of reduce the burden upon the citizen, and then not lose any portion, if applicable, any of those services.
We will certainly do that, Madam Chair. If I could just add a few things.
Absolutely.
In your calculus. First of all, Councilman Godwin cited language in the letter that the mayor received in the decision as to not appoint a special administrator at this time. And he cited the language regarding the loan payments that have been made timely. We will be in year 4 in the year 2021 regarding those loan payments. So they have been made timely for the 3 years prior to that. The project that Councilman Lay and the administration is working on is to ask the federal government to allow us to defer those payments, but we are not asking for forgiveness. So that's something that I want for each of the members of this body to keep in mind. We are not asking for forgiveness. We are asking for a deferral. And those payments are going to be due and payable at some point. So that burden will still rest on the city to make those payments at the appointed time or the agreed upon time. So it's something that we are asking for a interest-free deferral on, but that responsibility is still going to fall on this fiscal body's shoulders at some eventual date. I don't want us to lose sight of that. Even though we have gotten the letter from the federal government that everything is okay, please keep in mind that the SBOA audit report that the city received recently, many of you were present at the exit conference with that, show that this particular audit exception, where the wastewater revenue was used to subsidize the solid waste shortfall, was an audit exception that existed for 3 years. This is the 4th time that this audit exception has existed with the SBOA. So even though we are concerned and we have been talking about the federal government, we also have to be conscious of our responsibilities to our own state. This is the Prince administration's watch. We cannot say past December 31st, 2020, that this existed in prior administrations. If we don't fix it in 2020, then we have a problem. And we cannot point to the prior administration's shortfalls with what happens in 2020. As the mayor pointed out, that would be the impetus for this administration to ask for the government to reconsider its position on special administrator, because this body may decide not to move forward with it. Also, the mayor pointed out in his comments that the city cannot do it. We cannot fund it. You all are intimately familiar with our budget. You know what we have. We cannot afford to take on over $500,000 additional when the budget that we presented before this council already projected a $3 million shortfall. So to add over $500,000 to that shortfall is certainly not feasible. As the mayor pointed out, we cannot do that. And I just want for us to stop for a moment and remember that it's not the city and the GSD. We're not trying to, if we are trying to protect the residents, we can't say we're going to lessen the burden on the residents by absorbing this cost at the GSD level and making the city take it on. If the civil city takes it on, a $650,000 difference, then that's going to affect the residents, but just perhaps in a different way. If we have to use those funds for services at that level, that means that we're going to have to reduce services at another level. We're just squeezing the balloon. The air is going to be in there, but the air is going to go to a different level. If we squeeze down on one particular set of services, then that means we're not going to have those for the citizens of Gary. So those are the things that I wanted to mention, so that as you calculate your decision, I wanted you to keep those things in mind, because it seems from the discussion that we may have been losing sight of that. Thank you very kindly, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Attorney McCain.
I have about 30 seconds, Madam Chairman. The money owed to the sanitary district just has to be paid sometime in the year 2021. It does not have to be paid January. It just has to be paid during that calendar year too. That's the only point I wanted to clear up. Now, that's what the mayor explained to me. Sometime in the year 2021, it must be paid. And that would still make the city be a good payee, for the lack of a better term. So we don't have to pay it in January. So we do have time on that amount.
So Madam Chair,
Thank you, Attorney Lay, Councilman Lay, sorry. Yes, Mr.
It don't matter.
Bakari?
I'd rather
I-
be an attorney than a councilman. Take my word on it.
I just don't want there to be any misinformation out there. It absolutely, without federal government approval of otherwise, it needs to be paid by January 31st.
Oh,
Okay,
now that's new. That's new. That's not what was explained to me.
Okay. No, it's not new. It's what's in the decree, but
No,
I'm
I'm
not an
not.
attorney. I'm not an attorney. So we'll
But we
have an
both
attorney
can
look at
read. We can read. They taught other people to read too. Even my little grandson, he reads. He's 4. So you're saying in the consent decree, I thought the repayment was somewhat outside of the consent decree. Are you saying it's in the consent decree? This
yeah,
repayment?
it's absolutely made a part of the consent decree, and it's January 31st of every
Okay.
calendar year for every year payment until it's paid in full.
And that's the 4.3 million. That's fine. That's fine. It was
No, it's not
just-
4.3. This year it will be $600,000.
No, I understand that. That's the 4.3 million is your overall added together.
Got it. Okay. Yep. Correct.
Yeah, that'll come to 4.3. I understand. Second year is over $1 million, I believe. Okay, I don't have a problem with that. That corrects something that I was told.
So, Madam Chair, for Mr. Ricard, so essentially we're saying that if a court defers the obligation, then we could pay it at any point. It could be in 2022, right? It depends on how long that deferral is for.
Right.
So it's just important that we get our deferral prior to January 30th so that we're not in compliance by trying to do it in February or a later date. Is that what you're suggesting, Mr. Ricard?
I don't know that I'm suggesting anything other than I kind of lost. I'm sorry, Councilman, but I at the end of the day, it's a cost of the service, right? And the other thing, I think a few moments ago, Councilwoman Atkins, you had mentioned that maybe we go back and work with Carl to figure out how much of those city services we could sort of parse out, meaning the $650,000. What of that $650,000 is, if we make a pie chart, if you will, how does it line up? I can tell you right now, I have the data right in front of me. 80% of that is general services. So that's cleanups, that's home demolitions. I don't know if a lot of the council knows, but almost every day there's home demolition waste going to the transfer station, right? There's that many homes being torn down in Gary. So 80% of that is that type of waste.
So isn't home demolition done at a redevelopment where I know there's dollars there. And
Correct, for the demolition and the contracting, but the waste, when it's done in-house, which a lot of the homes are done in-house, that waste is taken to the transfer station under the general services ticket.
And we pay for the tonnage there, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
So can I ask a question in relation?
Yes, Councilman Godwin.
Thank you. So in relation to what Councilman Brewer asked, why can't redevelopment be billed for the waste? I mean, you can't just say, you can't pay for part of it, right? I mean, it's not only the demolition of it, it's the full, all the factors of production, right? Everything that's involved in it, including waste disposal. So why aren't we billing redevelopment for the total cost of the demolition?
Well, redevelopment certainly could have their own account. I think at the end of the day, I'm not sure how we got here or why this is done this way. It's something we've inherited at GSD, but I could tell you my profession would be that there would be fewer homes demolished, right? If they're having to pay themselves for the cost, I would say on average, half the cost of home demolition is disposal of the material. And if they are having to pay that themselves, that would be mathematically half the amount of homes demolished on any given year.
Because I know there are some grants involved too, right? I mean, there's grant dollars for some of it's direct expenditures.
There has been, yeah.
And I know there's a lot of
but
stuff
if
too.
grant dollars get stretched, right? You're able to do many more homes if you can dispose of the waste somewhere else, right?
Right.
So
But I
And that's
think
what's happening.
they should bear the full cost of that. They should be honest in their accounting about what it actually costs to do the demolition. So I think that part of the analysis should factor in what it would look like for them to do all of it. I know there's still farm stuff, right? And so maybe with some of these transactions, they'll have more dollars to pay for the real cost of the demolition. So I think that as the rubber starts to meet the road, to Attorney McCain is very prescient and I think true north point is that at the end of the day, these services have to be paid for. So whatever things we have to do to be creative and flexible, I think we should definitely approach redevelopment on that. And they may have to pay the full cost and just factor that in. So that's all I wanted to say about that.
Yeah.
And the last thing I did want to just say, I certainly understand what Attorney McCain is saying. He is correct, right? That somehow it's going to have to be paid for. And so I think if we can mitigate that somewhat by having redevelopment pay its fair share, maybe eliminating some of those services that we were talking about that are offered for people individuals just to come down there and dispose of their waste, contractors using it. If we eliminate that, that's not my concern. I think that's a small number of people. The vast majority of residents are not going to the transfer station. And so I'm not interested in subsidizing contractors. And so I think you should just bring it down to the bare bones of what it actually costs for the city cleanup efforts and what it costs for, City Hall, the parks, et cetera, for them to dispose of their trash. And I think Councilman Brewer made a point about, some of these parks are revenue generating, right? So it's not, I think, unreasonable to expect that they would contribute toward the cost, especially weddings and other events, right? I mean, people are having events, creating trash. It wouldn't be unreasonable to expect that there would be some payments toward the cost of that. So I would just consider looking at what's absolutely essential, what that number is. And if that's $200,000, it's probably about as high as we could go without driving the rate way up. Then let's factor that in to an additional option on top of that base amount. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Godwin. So, Mr. Vicardi, in terms of, I guess it's just this one action item, right? Us just being able to do a deeper dive on the services aspect of it, and then potentially trying to do an assessment in terms of what's feasible for the administration or these, respective entities to take responsibility for in-house, and then what will leave as the pass-through for the resident. How soon do you think, in working with you, the administration, possibly Mr. Center, that you guys can get back to us with that information?
I mean, I could get you the breakdown tonight. We have it. I'm not trying to be funny, but yeah, I mean that's the information we have.
So what you have, so you would just do like the percentages and then take that based on the total, the 650?
Sure. So what just to tell you how we have it, every month Republic sends us a bill, and in that bill is a breakdown based on the waste stream. So we have it broken down by beaches, parks.
Okay, yeah.
All the city facilities, right? Meaning the vertical construction facilities. Then we have general services. The only problem with general services is not broken out by redevelopment because they all tend to share trucks and resources. So a house being torn down, it's no different than a cleanup. I can't really parse that out, but we could though go back and ask them, how many homes they've taken down, and the weight doesn't really fluctuate that much. So we'd be able to have a good estimate of how much of that general services came from home demolition versus cleanups. But yeah, we can break it all down. The citizen drop too is all broken down, even by west and east side of the city.
All right, so I think that's great. If you can break that down and send it to, all stakeholders, and especially, I'm going to pinpoint Attorney McCain since he is representing administration still. And I think just as important to note, this only works if the administration agrees to the proposal in terms of bringing some of those services in-house, if redevelopment takes their piece of the pie as it relates to the degree, and then they accept responsibility for that. So, Attorney McCain, I'm just going to lean on you to kind of get back to us as well in terms of the thoughts of the administration once you see the breakdown that will be provided from GSD. Thank you. I just wanted to give these pinpoints, Mr. Bacardi. I know there probably was like misses. These were some things that was asked from the last committee meeting from certain members of the council. One was just the, I'm gonna say correct resolution that was passed in September the 21st that just showed the correct collection fee that the board, the sanitation district board approved. I think it was mentioned briefly that the one that we had did not have any type of fee schedule associated with it. So we just wanted to make sure that there was continuity between what was passed on their end and what was presented in front of the council. And then the other thing that we had asked for but had not received yet is this was, I think, Councilwoman Brown, when we talked about recycling, there was a request to get that recycling report. I think I had mentioned the contract that Republic, based on the terms, should be providing us with at least a quarterly report. And so we would like to provide that information to all members of the council, if it was a quarterly report or just at least, last month's usage in terms of recycling. Does any other members of the council have any other statements? Also, if you can get that to us by Friday, Mr. Ricardi, that would be fine, just to make sure that we tidy up those open-ended items and requests that the council had in our last meeting. Any other council member have any questions, comments about 2020-69?
Yes, Ms. Chairlady?
Yes.
Yeah, question for Mr. Vakari. Are you there, Mr. Vakari?
He's here. He's here. He's on mute.
Yes, sir. I'm here. I'm sorry.
I'm just wondering here. I'm listening, been listening to a lot of takeaways in terms of the contract. And, from a standpoint of what we owe, what the new rate will become, what is the possibilities of us looking at some enhancements of services to get more bang for our buck on the other end? Because we're just looking at it from a standpoint of debt. But we can look at this thing from another perspective also, in terms of looking of an enhancement of services, I don't know, maybe combining some effort, from Republic in coming up with better processes.
Sure. I mean, I'm all ears. We've spent, many years here trying to make this a better service. I definitely, if committee wants to get together and talk about that, but sure. I mean, we've really stretched and pushed Republic to the point of them providing, a lot of great additional services. I know they even do there are free events. If there's a well-coordinated city council requested event, say in the spring, a lot of spring cleanups, where they say we're having this neighborhood and we'd like to have some dumpsters donated, they have done that in the past. But as a matter of habit all the time, no, they don't do that, right? But if there's special one-off requests, they have done that in the past.
Just wondering if we should look at opportunities in improving the services. We're looking at it from what we owe, and that's a matter of fact. But as I said, there may be some gains in this from a standpoint of services as well, because one of this thing that this community has is a trash problem. Okay, and we're going to pay for it. If we take away on one end, we're going to pay for it on another end. It's just as simple as that. You and I have had that conversation in a previous meeting. So, again, I'm just looking at what enhancements, what gains we can make in other areas, because it's a total effort between the city and Republic and, of course, GSD.
Okay. Thank you, Councilman Weatherspoon. If there's no other comments from council members, I will open up comments from the public. Okay. Seeing none, we will move on to the next ordinance. CPO 2020-77. This is the ordinance for the city of Gary Indiana amending the fee schedule ordinance, which the old ordinance is 8968, by increasing and establishing fees for the City of Gary departments. Not sure who from the administration. It's sponsored by Mayor Jerome Prince. Who's from the administration will be giving the overview.
I can give the overview. This is Attorney Paul.
Okay, go ahead, Attorney Poe.
Yeah, so this is the fee schedule ordinance that we've I think since I've been here, I think we've only amended it. This will be the second time, or maybe the third time now. But ultimately, what we're looking at and what the administration has been looking at is trying to figure out which fees need to be updated according to both the workload and need, maybe the changes in technology, and the changes in services that are provided thereby. So in looking at the ordinance as proposed, I have provided the council with an outline of the changes, both with the original version, with the actual strike-throughs, and then the bolded sections that are the newer parts, and then a clean version, and then a memo overview that breaks that down. So going through department by department, and looking at the building department, we have an amendment whereby all building permits, all building permit inspection related work now is across the board is $50. Before the previous ordinance, had things that were broken down differently, and it really kind of just was monotonous. A lot of the work is, the work is mostly very, very similar. So you'll see the same thing with the next section, which is, that all permits, plumbing, electrical, HVAC, asbestos removal are all now based on the valuation of the project. That is, again, that kind of goes in line with what we had done the last time we had amended the ordinance, which was based that on the cost recovery. So essentially, looking at the project, looking how much work's going to be involved, looking how much of an inspection is going to be needed, and what is going to be required of the actual department. This kind of handles this across the board, whereby the valuation of the project determines how much the actual project, or how much the permit is going to cost. So individual types of permits are going to be removed from the fee schedule. Obviously, they'll still be handed out as electrical, plumbing, HVAC permits. But as far as the fee schedule is concerned, in order to kind of streamline things and right size the ordinance, making that just kind of across the board we're trying to clean that up. Additionally, one of the things that was previously left out of the left out of the fee schedule ordinance was the rental registration fees, and the late fees thereby are there included. There is an ordinance, I should say, that allows for the rental registration fees already, and the late fees. However, that was not added to the fee schedule ordinance previously, and that was just an oversight. So what this amendment does is includes those, it lists those under the building department where individuals would go to pay those fees. Furthermore, there's also the contractor's license exam fee. That again is an ordinance that was a fee that had already been included and had already been being charged for a while going back, but it was, in looking at the ordinance, the building commissioner had pointed out that was not included in the fee schedule ordinance. So what this amendment does is includes that. Moving on to the next department, we have environmental affairs. I believe we have Pete Julich and or Ms. Brenda Scott Henry. I know that they were previously on some of the previous committees, but in speaking with their department, they have amended their fees for the various permits, inspections, and increased across the board. Those permits and fees have not changed for a long time. They've remained stagnant for a very long time. And so with the need, the administrative need and the administrative costs involved, they've updated their fees accordingly. In addition to that, they also include a prescribed burn permit as opposed to an open burn or special burn permit, which previously had no fee. Going on to the next department, we've got the finance department, which that has been amended. In looking at it was pointed out that there was fees listed under the health department and the finance department for inspections and license fees, and it seemed as if almost it was duplicative. Where if you read it one way, it sounded as if you had to pay license fees and inspection fees to both finance and to the health department. And in order to remove that confusion, we've removed them from the finance department and left them under the health department. Additionally, we've consolidated all of the contractors' license fees instead of listing them separately. So again, just like how we did with the building permits, with the contractors' license fees that are listed under the finance department, which is where they actually pay those fees, it's just a contractor's license. So if you're an electrical contractor, plumbing contractor, general contractor, those fees are just across the board for those. Lastly, under finance, we've got the late fees that were updated for the general business license. Right now, the zoning administrator is the only individual running the zoning department. We have one individual, and it's been like that for a while. We've only had typically one employee, and maybe if we're lucky at times, we have we'll have like an intern or something like that helping out there. So in order to help the zoning department kind of manage the beginning of the year rush, which is always the busiest portion of the year or part of the year for the zoning department, we're trying to do is get basically stagger the business licenses in alphabetical order. So in A through K, if you're A through K, your late fee is now February 1st, which it always was, but we're also allowing L through Z to come in as March 1st. So what we're hoping is that, L through Z will come in between February to March. A through K would come in, as the final rush from January to February. And you could obviously get your license before that, but as far as that late rush, January is always madness for the zoning department for that reason. So we've tried to update the ordinance accordingly to cover that. One of the things that we actually just I had been speaking with Mr. Boria as it pertained to the wording that's used under that section. And I think what we're going to do, if you take a look at your ordinance under the general business license section, if you're looking at the clean version, the way that it's listed under there on subsection 12 of page 7, under general business license, it lists there the businesses with the first letter A through K. Right now it says due by February 1st. What we're thinking is that'll essentially will change that verbiage to considered late on February 1st, and considered for L through Z considered late on March 1st, just to clarify that's the date that it's considered late, and then change that where it states the late fee $35, instead of it being 31 through 120 days, it would just state 1 through 120 days. So that'll cover that late fee portion. So basically it lays out there, if you're over 120 days late after that, if you're A through K and you're not there by February 1st, 120 days after that, you move up to the next bracket of late fees, which is $50. So turning back to the different departments, we've got the fire department, which would be the change in the fire department is that the medical records requests, we're essentially updating that for the fire department. The fire department qualifies as a provider, as a health provider for health records or medical records, and there are certain charges that are allowed that are specified there, as far as labor fees, certified records, expedited records, page counts, dollar amounts per page, etc. And what we're looking at doing here is cleaning that up and making sure that it complies with the state statute. So that's the change that goes under the fire department. With Parks Department, the only change there was removing Gleason from the fee schedule. The Planning Commission, the prices for the Planning Commission documents, those have changed, just with the increases in costs that, that I don't think those have been changed in a very, very long time. And then finally, the zoning department, the application to do a zoning change for the Planning Commission through the zoning department, that's where it's currently listed, changes from 250 to 1200. The zoning verification letter increases from 50 or 25 to 50. We're adding a zoning compliance letter, which is different than a zoning verification letter, and that is at $100. And then if there's research that's involved with that, there's a fee that goes along with that, $100 for each hour. And again, those were increased as a result of the work that's involved in actually executing the requests and the services. Lastly, we combined the severability and the repeal sections just to kind of clean that format for consolidation. So.
Madam Chair. I don't know where the chairperson is. I think Councilman Witherspoon is on. Do you want to take over as you're the other member of the Ways and Means Committee?
The chairperson is muted, but you're the president.
Okay. Well, let me say this. I have a couple questions. First, thank you so much, Mr. Pohl. And I will say this at the council meeting next week too. I think that in the future, and I'm not blaming you in any way, this is something we may want to have to begin a little earlier, right, in the year, given that these fees technically go into effect for some of them in less than 30 days. So if we wanted to do a certain kind of analysis, recommend certain changes, we're kind of time limited, not to a degree. So in the future, if we could maybe get these along with the budget, or maybe even, we know we're going to have fees, right? Maybe even in the summer, so that we can just start working on that a little earlier. One of the things that I campaigned on and still feel strongly about, I'm not sure if this is the appropriate year to do it or not, but I don't like the idea of a flat fee for all businesses. Councilman Lay is a business owner. I'm a business owner. Councilman Brewer is a business owner. And I believe I can say that we run businesses that are not large, right? That don't have 100 employees, don't bring in, maybe, I don't know Councilman Lay, but don't bring in millions of dollars every year. Our businesses don't have, significant impact on the streets, or we don't make big demands of city services. But we know that there are many businesses that do. And one of the things that I want us to look at, if not this year, in the future, in the near future, is a graduated schedule for the business license fee. I just don't think it makes sense for, one person law office or a small real estate brokerage or a mom and pop shop to pay the same $100 that hypothetically U.S. Steel might pay, right? Or some of our large trucking companies, which we know have an impact on the roads, or other big organizations in the city. And I know some cities have a tiered structure. You can either do it by revenue, which you kind of have an honor system. It's kind of hard to track revenue, but certainly we can look at the Department of Employment and see headcount. So if an organization has more than 50 employees, maybe their fee is $500. If they have more than 150 employees, maybe their fee is $1,000. But we need to do something to make sure that those who use a lot of the resources and have the ability and capacity to give more, that they are paying their fair share. So if there's nothing, I may make a small amendment or try to make an amendment to a small degree to that effect, because I don't think an extra few $100s is going to kill some of these large businesses that make a tremendous amount of revenue, have a tremendous cost on the city, but give very little very often. In terms of to the city, civil city, I know they pay taxes and they employ people, and that's obviously very important, and I respect that. But we do need to have a better fee structure. Lastly, there are nonprofits in the city. I believe strongly in nonprofits, but there are some, especially around the treatment of mental health and other types of facilities, where I know from conversations with police officers that they present tremendous demands on police and fire services. in terms of the number of calls that go to some of these facilities. I love their mission. It's important, but they're not paying any tax, right? So we're not getting any property tax. Yet there's sometimes I've seen it 200 or 300 calls, 400 calls to just one facility. And that's obviously a tremendous demand on public safety resources, which we know are already limited. And so I'd like for us to legally find a way, in a fair way, to have some kind of, whether it's an impact fee, you know, or high user fee of city services for some of these certain types of facilities that we know are repeat users of city services, and they do not pay anything into the coffers of the city to recoup those costs. So those are just a few thoughts I wanted to throw out there. I may attempt an amendment on the business license front. I think there's more research to do on the user impact fee prospect that I'm discussing, but just wanted to put that out there. Thank you.
Yeah,
Madam Chair,
Councilman Lay.
again, I was getting I agree with my president again. I believe that's an excellent idea. It just requires them to do more work than they're doing. With one exception, my business is one person, so I don't impact at all. I don't drive everything. But I think that absolutely, taking all of the joking out of it, is absolutely a good suggestion.
Mm-hmm.
The entire statement he made,
Mm-hmm.
and that simply will require the executive branch to do a little bit more than it is doing now. And again, I'm not blaming Attorney Poe. That's the way it's been done in the past, and certainly I didn't agree with it, but I was the attorney, not the councilman at the time. So now I agree with Mr. Godwin. He's right. Assessing a few dollars to a major business is not going to hinder them at all.
Mm-hmm.
And
So, Attorney Poe, I have two questions relative to what Councilman Lay just said and Councilman Godwin. My question was relative to, like, how do you all assess the analysis in terms of what the fee should be? Are you doing any benchmarking against other municipalities, or what's best practice is used to ensure that we are to scale?
So absolutely. Yeah, just to all the council members that have spoke that on this point, the administration is obviously more than willing to work with you on this. And I think it goes hand in hand with kind of how we started to really look at some of these fees as really more of a cost recovery, which is actually one of the sections that we've listed in here, because there's absolutely a need to be fluid with these situations. If you have these rigid amounts, it's very, very difficult. So for example, with the general business license fee, that is something that it's been set for a long period of time. It's been set as at $150 and then $100 renewal. And what goes into that had been looked at as, what is the administrative cost of actually, ensuring that fee, or ensuring that there's a list that's kept, that it's maintained, that there's people that are being, their staff, that is the administrative cost of having staff that are keeping track of all of these different businesses that are in the city, who's not complying with it, who are complying, who are not complying with it, that are, what the contact information is for these individuals, and then whether or not they're in good standing. There's actually quite a bit of work that goes into that. But that being said, looking at it from the standpoint of a user fee, it takes that a step further, which obviously we're more than welcome to, or more than willing to work with.
So the dollar value that's assessed for fee based on each category is quantified by an internal analysis, you're saying, that incorporates administrative costs?
The ones that we have changed, yes. Some
Okay.
of the costs are probably, as we had stated before with the environmental, for example, when I had inquired into the different departments and said, hey, everybody please take a look at your fees that you're currently charging, for the departmental services or things that you produce for the consumers and the citizens in the city, and take a look at what that actually costs your department, because ultimately at the end of the day, we couldn't just say, okay, well, to have a business license, it's going to cost you $10,000, you know, there's got to be some component to it to where it reflects what the actual administrative costs are on the city and what the costs are on the, you know, for any services that are provided thereof. So it's got to be reflective of that in some way or another. So the new charges that that was changed based upon what the impact was, an analysis that was done by the individual departments. So they made that determination based on what they believe either are the man hours that are spent. So for example, like zoning changed or they added a research fee. So if it takes them several hours of research to try and figure out, you know, a particular zoning question for, you know, for an individual that wants to either change the use or change the developmental standards, there's a significant amount of time that goes into that. So the zoning administrator has, you know, based upon what that cost is going to be to the city and for his time and for the time that's actually taken from others in order to complete his job. That's why that was put together for that.
I'm going to recommend that, you know, it's taken a step further. I think benchmarking should be done. We should definitely be assessing ourselves comparable to our neighboring towns to see if, you know, we are, I want to say, like in terms of being competable, because it's not really being competable, but at least we're within the same playing field to ensure that this is a revenue generating factor for the city. And so we want to make sure that we're doing due diligence and utilizing benchmarking and best practicing for our fee schedules.
Absolutely. And just to note, we have been benchmarking. I mean, that is one of the things that I did not mention, but as with almost everything that, you know, whenever the city does make changes or when we're looking at, you know, whether or not there are certain things that need to be amended, we definitely take a look at what our neighbors are doing, what other cities that are, you know, similar to the city of Gary, both in state and out of state. So we definitely keep our eye and our ears to other communities, just to make sure that either we're not completely out of line or maybe we're way behind. You know, we've always, you know, as a city, we've got to evolve. We've got to ensure that we're doing, you know, what's either the common practice, and then at certain times we're going to take that step to be the leader. You know, maybe we do look at, you know, implementing a different charge and, you know, seeing essentially what we can do that's both good for the citizens and good for the city.
Okay. Any other council members have any comments, questions? Any member of the public? Okay. It is 8:44 p.m. and we will call the Ways and Means Committee adjourned at this time.
Thank you, guys.
Have a good evening.